Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 1 of the anime series Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu, Sukeroku Futatabi-hen, or Descending Stories, Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu, Season 2, for all intents and purposes, of this particular series, and I'm just so happy it's back. I gotta say, I really loved that they sort of ushered us back in, having, Yotaro effectively doing a Rakugo performance in getting us all caught up to date again. For anyone who either hadn't watched Season 1 or wanted to be refamiliarized with everything that had come before, the entire backstory that the Yakumo, formerly Kikuhiko, had told he and Konatsu, his former partner and best friend Sukeroku's daughter, who is now an adult of her own. She has a child of her own and all this stuff. 10 years has passed since they all first encountered each other. It was just really awesome being refamiliarized in that such a way through this performance art of Rakugo. And I, once again, sort of instantly fell in love with the series and the characters, the world, the environment, the backdrop, and the idea that, once again, we're very much sort of having it hammered home, which is a term they use throughout the course of this episode, as far as the lessons Yakumo is trying to pound into Yotaro. We're really having it hammered into us that, Rakugo is a dying art form. It's next to becoming the dodo on the list, and it's very much something the Yakumo really kind of sort of feels like he's going to take with him when he finally passes on. Even though he has made Yotaro agree to these 3 stipulations of becoming an apprentice to him, the idea of clearing a pathway to keep this art form living beyond him and being true to him and learning all of the classics of Rakugo backward and forward, all this kind of stuff. He has made every effort to do that, and yet still Yakumo believes, this is going to be something that is buried alongside him when his time finally comes. And there are aspects to this episode that actually kind of surprised me. We're introduced to a character, I don't remember actually if we saw this character in the first season or not, but Mangetsu, who, I guess he's got a job on the side, or he's got an alternate job to Rakugo, and he was once someone who studied under the Yakumo and such like that. And it really kind of reminded me, it started making me wonder if we were going to see history repeat itself, where this cat kind of looks really a lot like the Yakumo when he was known as Kikuhiko as a younger man. And the whole idea with Konatsu being there and not knowing who the father of her child is. Yotaro has professed he wants to be the father of the child. He wants to take care of Konatsu with all the time they've lived together, which is really sweet. I really love his overtures toward her. He just kind of is assuming that it's all going to be okay, to put his arm around her and say, this is going to be my wife and I'm going to be the baby daddy, even though I'm not really, and all this stuff. And she kind of doesn't want any part of him for the most part, but I really love that heartening dialogue between them. She's come to see in celebration of his taking on the name Sukeroku, the whole idea of his looking to take on this name was because he wanted to create a career for himself to be able to take care of both himself and Konatsu and the child. And it's very heartening that he professes how much he cares for her and cares for her well-being. To see such a hard facade, in the case of Konatsu, suddenly kind of breaking down, blushing, getting sort of teary-eyed and choked up, that someone is this willing to go that far and away for her benefit. It really is meaningful to her. It's like moving mountains within her, and she actually breaks down and thanks Yotaro, now being officially named Sukeroku, though everyone keeps calling him Yoda, they'll never sort of let that go. They're making fun of him. Oh, you'll always be the Yotaro to us and all this kind of stuff. He has succeeded in taking on this name. The Yakumo is somewhat indifferent, which is really kind of a surprise to me. He seems very indifferent to all the things Yotaro wants to do in taking on this name, in becoming, someone who wants to create that path to keep the vitality of Rakugo as a performing art, to keep it living, to try to create a newfound longevity for it. For all intents and purposes, the Yakumo just seems to be very passive about it, not very engaged in Yotaro's whole outlook and everything he's trying to set himself up to do. So even in a manner of asking for her hand, even though, the Yakumo is not her flesh and blood father. He's been sort of an adoptive father, I guess you could say. And so, of course, when Yotaro goes and asks his permission, in a sense, well, do whatever you want, is the Yakumo's basic response. And I just find that interesting for someone who is so passionate about keeping this alive and the backward and forward of what we found going on between he and the Sukeroku of the day, that whole love triangle thing. That's very much what I said. I was starting to wonder if we were going to see history repeat itself with this guy coming in and making an overture to Konatsu and saying, oh, I wanted to ask you out and I didn't know you were married. Who is the daddy and everything like that. And Yotaro comes over and puts his arm around her. But thankfully, they didn't really go there. And then, of course, we have sort of the other leg drop in the fact that after this very celebratory inaugural performance with Yotaro taking on the Sukeroku name, he's kind of sort of bum-rushed out in the streets after having gotten changed. And I guess he's back on his way to the Yakumo's place or whatever like that. But by this guy who, for all intents and purposes, is a very well-known, famous writer, Higuchi. And I believe this might have been one of the cats we actually see in a very short scene in the first season, approaching the current Yakumo when he was still known as Kikuhiko or something like that, asking to become his apprentice. And of course, as we know, Yakumo turned him down and he went on to make a name for himself. So, it's very interesting that he finds such an appreciation in what Yotaro, now Sukeroku, come Sukeroku, has been putting forth in his Rakugo performances. The idea that he gets the gist of it's all about the live performance and the artistry and the craft are elements that are kind of lost on Yotaro, but this Higuchi guy feels like he can answer to that. It's very much in the plight of how he outlines the whole framework of Rakugo. It's very similar to what we heard Sukeroku saying in the first season, the idea of all of those masters of old. In some ways, their art form, their craft, how they approached it, how they told their classic stories, these are elements that are dead and gone. With every new generation who's taking this over for 300 years hence, every new sort of grand swath that has been carved into the chapter of Rakugo, it's all a matter of reinventing the wheel, and that has to be a part of it. You have to somehow find an equilibrium, a balance between creating the art anew, but also hearkening back to what is, beloved and so well known from ages past. And this guy really feels like, as a writer, as such a well-known, wordsmith, he feels like he can answer to his own passions for creating Rakugo and really hearkening back to that classic element, the element that goes just above Yotaro's head, while also having the young, fresh blood of Yotaro as the new Sukeroku, putting in that vitality of performing those classic works and those brand new sort of revitalized works that he wants to co-op with Yotaro, with Sukeroku. And it's really interesting how that aspect of it kind of comes full circle. That was a plight that was very much sort of debated back and forth between the original Yakumo and Kikuhiko and Sukeroku, and even between Sukeroku and Kikuhiko themselves. They had very different approaches, whereas Kikuhiko's was very much the classical, Sukeroku's was sort of on the cutting edge and had much more vitality to it. Thus do we see two very similar minds coming together rather than straying apart. And I just find that highly fascinating and intriguing. I think my favorite aspect, though, is, of course, the depth of characterization in the relationships between Yotaro, Sukeroku, and, Konatsu, respectively. His feeling for her, it may not be head over heels love, puppy love, or even a romantic love in a sense, but it's a love out of having spent so much time together, being very caring and concerned for the well-being of each other, taking care of each other, because that's just the way life angled itself out for them. And I kind of feel like, there is some level of sentiment that, well, love, the romantic love may come in time, but I want to take care of you. I want to be there for you. You've been there for me. We've been there for each other. We can make a successful, happy life together And this baby shouldn't grow up alone. And I love that he extends this overture, finally catching up with Yakumo once again, going back to his place. Konatsu's gone out shopping, or maybe somewhere else. We don't exactly know. Tentatively, she's gone out shopping. I think there might be more to it based on the PV for the next episode. But effectively, the newfound Sukeroku is there to basically approach Yakumo. I moved out when I reached one of the many tiers in the successive going up the ladder in the Rakugo, and now I want to come back. I want to move back in. I want to become a family. I want all of us to be a family together. For sort of as part of that grand design, for the nature of taking care of Konatsu, taking care of the child, being in sort of a grandfatherly fashion around the Yakumo, and still being able to learn from him, as well as evolving the craft with his potentially newfound partnership with this writer Higuchi. And if I hadn't said it enough in the opening, I'm so happy this series is back. I love it. I love the characterization. I love the heartwarming sort of feel-good vibe of it and everything. I just love this series, and I love seeing a continuation. Even though we've skipped ahead so far, there's still enough familiarity. That whole Rakugo performance, as I say, at the start of the episode, got me right back into it, reminded me where we left off, and it was like picking up your favorite book and reading from the last chapter you left off on all over again. And so yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you were a fan of the first season of Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu, if you're back on board for season 2, if you love it as much as I do, if you're happy as much as I am that it's back. But yeah. Anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. Otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. I'll catch you all later. Peace.